The role has been passed around. This week we're going to talk about synergy and the importance of synergy. As we talked about in the past, um, these three habits related to interpersonal success all intertwine. And so that was one reason I had to kind of change, at least tell you what I used to think. I used to think that perhaps um, seek first to understand should come before think win-win. But this year or this semester, I've been convinced that it's in the right order. But it's hard to put them in an order because they so do correlate with or intertwine with each other. That we talked about in the past, to think win-win is kind of the philosophy behind succeeding interpersonally, in that you can't be too worried about somebody else getting something that you won't get. That instead of thinking that way, you recognize there is abundance enough for everybody to share. And in fact, if you achieve this habit of synergy, that even in sharing, you might come out with more. That the size of the pie might increase, and thereby you both end up with more than one of you would have had by yourself. Um, we're going to watch a number of videos today as we talk about this, because there are some excellent training videos related to this topic. The first two are by Covey himself. He's starting to get, at this point, starting to get a little bit older. His kind of hoarse in his throat, and so he's kind of a little bit hard to hear sometimes. But with the smaller class we have here, it was problematic on Tuesday, but I think it'll be fine here today. Then the 5 trainings for third alternative thinking is mostly done by one of his associates, who does a very good job. And I don't know, on Tuesday, I ended up leaving most of those for people to watch out of class, and I might again today too. I wanted to have some time to watch some of the TED.com video about predictably irrational behavioral economist Dan Ariely, and I think I probably will watch a little bit of that today also. The other two at the bottom you can watch on your own. They don't relate real strongly to this topic, but I think I brought them up from a different week because I knew we were going to watch quite a few in class, and so you really aren't going to have a lot to watch outside of class today. It will be, I'm sure, well under an hour of video to watch outside of class. I hope you're watching these videos for your sake. I mean, I think they're extremely valuable, but I know some people will try to take shortcuts. Okay. So let's kind of read there's a couple of slides that are kind of wordy. They're pretty much taken right from Covey. And in explaining what synergy means to him anyway, and I presume should mean to us. Putting habit 4, 5, and 6 together, you have a perfect model for human interaction. Put simply, first, be mentally committed to the idea that a solution that will benefit all parties may be constructed. Next, invest the necessary time and effort to really understand the other party and do that first. Finally, creatively brainstorm a synergistic solution, a natural product of mutual understanding and respect. So again, as I said, these 3 habits all intertwine, and they typically do end up creating, I mean, the idea is 1 + 1 = 3, so to speak. I guess down here, I can try to pull it out, I guess. He says, he's going to say in a video here, we'll listen to it, but he says that frequently when you compromise is not win-win. Compromise is both sides giving up something. So in some ways, it's 1 + 1 = 1/2, because you're not getting, neither side is getting what they want. So compromise is not the same as synergize. Synergize is spending the time to come up with new solutions that are actually better for both sides. And also negative is if you get into, you can't have it so much negative energy in a discussion or in a negotiation or whatever you want to call it, that it can even be worse than that. It can be worse than 1 + 1 = 1/2. So we're looking for the 1 + 1 = 3 solution. Looking for the third alternative. The third alternative, by the way, does not come with only one new idea, so to speak. Brainstorming requires lots of discussion, lots of ideas floating around until finally there's this aha moment when everybody realizes that's perfect. That solves all the problems. This is better than we ever thought of before. And so that's when you realize we did it. We did something special here. And so that's when you feel the power of synergy. I'll come back and watch that in a second. I'm going to go through another slide here first. So synergy is, as he said, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Finding a synergistic solution means finding a solution which is better than either party might first. Such a solution can only be found if both parties truly understand that the other party's position, the fruit of habits 4 and 5. So again, all 3 habits are necessary in order to achieve this. You have to be willing to pursue a solution in which both sides win. It's not a win-lose, it's not a lose-win, it's not a lose-lose. But now you're going for the win-win. And almost by definition, for it to be truly win-win, you need synergy. It's just because that's how you get to 1 + 1 = 3. I suppose it's possible to get 1 + 1 = 2, and then you kind of win. But it's much more powerful if you can achieve synergy and get 1 + 1 = 3. There are lots of examples of that in life. For example, my oldest daughter has 6 children, so in that case, 1 + 1 = 8. My second daughter, has 7 children, so 1 + 1 = 9. So yeah, that's synergy, right? It's a natural synergy that we take for granted, that is biological in nature, but it's real. And there's lots of, and in a sense, it's a good analogy. It's a good analogy for what we're talking about. You have two parties, 2 sides of a negotiation or whatever, and something blossoms out of it. That is, you might say, born out of it, born out of all those discussions, out of that positive attitude, out of that feeling that you can both win, out of the effort to brainstorm, and then indeed, 1 + 1 can be more than 3. It can be much more than that, even in a business world, not just in biological world. There was, I think I'm not sure if we'll get to that video, but his associate that is going to teach some of these videos was talking about, I'm trying to remember now what exactly the story was. They have, in their training, they have lots of examples of it, and the book that he wrote, The Third Alternative, was a book that he wrote after the 7 habits, and that is filled with examples of situations where 1 + 1 = much more than that. If you think about it, in a sense, that story I told towards towards the beginning of the semester about Johnny, the bagger. That was to illustrate, being proactive, and indeed how a proactive person can be 5,000% more effective than somebody who's reactive. But it's also, if you go ahead and include and throw into that the trainer gave the ideas, Johnny grabbed the ideas, he's the only one that grabbed the ideas, and he thought about it, and finally came up with his solution to it. So even in that, and that's the sort of thing that does happen as you start communicating with people, that you suddenly have this spurt of energy, this spurt of creativity, when something is kind of revealed to you that, wow, this could really work. And that even happened with Johnny, the bagger. And he thought, hey, I can do this. And so, he's prompted by the trainer, the customer service trainer that they had come in, but then he took it, because he was proactive, he took it way beyond that. Okay, I need some guys to come up here for something. I think I will pause my video. Doing this. So, again, working together, we can do what no one person can do by themselves. We were trying to get that 90-degree angle. We were trying to get that position, but not really possible to have a true 90-degree angle like that, because you're going to fall over, whatever. Okay, well, let's go back. I'm going to pause this now, and we're going to go listen to some of these videos, and we'll talk about them as we go along. Well, I can't get my video come down, but that's okay. It's no big deal. So, I see. This is not where we're supposed to be, though, is it? This can be. So I'm going to go here instead. So, valuing differences, recognition of your own perceptual limitations is important. We have to doubt ourselves a little bit. One of the biggest problems in talking to people is to think that we're always right. And that's when you probably are going to start clashing. It was when you think you're right and the other side thinks they're right. The idea of appreciating resources available to interaction with others. In other words, they know something you don't know. They have a different major than you have. They have a different upbringing than you have. They have just a different perception altogether. Perception is a funny thing, and we talked about this once before. But we have differences mentally. We have differences emotionally. We have differences psychologically. We have differences physically. We have differences all over the place, educationally, which I guess would be mentally here. But the point is that we all have different perspectives that, as Dr. Covey says, can be of value. We should not see them as a threat. We should see them as something of value as we go into a situation where we might want to brainstorm. And we should be looking for those brainstorm opportunities. We had something like this early in the semester. On the left side, how many people see the duck? How many see the duck here? How many see the rabbit? How many see both of them? Okay, well, there's both here. We had that problem before when we had a picture kind of like the one on the right. And again, like the one on the right, actually, there is a young woman and an old woman here in this picture, if you can see it. How many people can see the old woman in this picture? And how many people can see the young woman in this picture? How many can see both young and old in this picture? It's very similar to the one, it's extremely similar to the one we looked at the start of the semester. So if you can't see both of them, then you're blind. You're idiots. No. But isn't that kind of the attitude we have sometimes? When somebody sees something differently than we do, we think they must be idiots. You know, what kind of idiot are you? You can't see both an old woman and a young woman there. What kind of idiot are you? You can't see a rabbit and a duck there, or one or the other. Whatever we're seeing, whatever we're perceiving, we can't understand why somebody else can't perceive what we're perceiving. And that leads into conflict. So in valuing differences, we want, he mentioned last week, in seeking first to understand, then to be understood, is that we are giving somebody a psychological ear. We are giving them, in the last video, he said it's psychological air. That it's like breathing. When somebody takes the time to understand you, that maybe happens so seldom that it's like getting a breath of fresh air. That it's so welcome to have somebody listen to you and understand you, that this is a great sensation. Now, the fact that this person ends up, he may have been somebody that you thought was going to be an enemy, but he's there sitting there listening to you, sincerely wanting to understand you, not to manipulate you, but to truly understand, so that he feels like you can build something together. You can achieve synergy. So he needs to understand you. He's, or she, obviously. It's important for him to understand, and you can sense that this isn't a manipulation. You can sense that also if it is. So it has to be sincere to be very useful. In fact, it can totally backfire if you're using it as a technique. As I understand you, da 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 da, and they can see through that air of manipulation. The words may be the same. If I understand you, what you're concerned about is that you're going to come out of this and in a way that's going to hurt, it's going to jeopardize your long-term income. Is that right? Now, that's one way. As I understand you, you're concerned about money, whatever. It's almost the same words, but you can tell when somebody's, you can read somebody's mind sometimes. We really can, can't we? We can read people's mind. Now, sometimes that's the trouble when we think we can and we don't, but sometimes we really do. We really do, through body language, through their expressions, we can truly read their minds. The same words are not perceived the same in many cases, depending on how they're said and everything, all the things around it, body language, eye contact, you can tell. So in trying to create this situation of synergy, it has to be sincere. You have to really buy into it. And you have to help them to understand that this is a value to you, that you believe in brainstorming. You believe in win-win. You believe that if you can understand them, that you can come up with a better solution, a third alternative that will be better for both of you. And if you can say that with some passion and mean it, then they will want to enjoy that experience with you. They may have questions, they may have doubts, but if you start first by seeking first to understand, then be understood, and that effort is sincere and they can tell it's sincere, then it naturally leads them to wanting to, not only a willingness and almost a desire to hear you. You've listened to them, and now they want to understand you because you've given them that gift, and they feel a need to reciprocate. And so you're launched. So in a way, you're kind of conceding at first. Not really, but they may perceive that you're conceding in that you're saying, I want to understand you first. Let me go ahead and explain it to me and make sure I understand where you're coming from so that we can see what we can do to achieve a win-win situation here. And so you give them that gift, the psychological air, as he called it last week, and they are willing, if not excited to do so, they at least are willing to hear you out in almost every case. It's rare that you would not find that. I'm going to, again, I'm going to jump over these videos a second, because the video, the TED.com video, we're not going to watch the whole thing, or maybe watch 5 minutes of it, 18 minutes. I hope you like it enough that you decide to come back and watch the full 18 minutes, because it really is interesting. This guy is very smart. He's from MIT, one of the top universities in the world. He's a behavioral economist, which means basically he looks at economics from the weird behavior of people. And he realized, and what he's going to show you is that sometimes we make really, really bad decisions. We think we're thinking about it. We don't. We are making decisions without thinking at all. And we'll look at a couple of his examples. Okay, well, anyway, I hope you enjoyed that video. I hope you understood him okay. But it is kind of funny to think about, once you see his examples, how stupid we really are. Isn't that more or less what you get out of this? We're pretty stupid people. That we don't even realize when we're making stupid decisions. The whole idea of that magazine, since I'm a publisher, that one where they, with The Economist, that experiment, all you do is add something there that nobody wants, and it changes their decision making between the other two. Totally reverses it. So, for a magazine publisher like myself, what do I need to do? Well, I need to put something in there that makes no sense at all. This idea of, you can get the digital version for half price, you can get the printed version for full price, or you can get the digital and printed version for full price, and suddenly everybody wants the full price, the two. But you take out that middle option and you just say, do you want the digital version or the printed version for twice the much money? And they immediately go for the digital version. So it makes no really good sense. I think the DMV one makes a little more sense, where people, what he was saying there is that it's actually when the decision is harder when you leave the default. And so giving your organs is, for some people, a hard decision to make. And when I die, am I going to let them take my heart and give it to somebody else, if they can get to them quick enough? Or when I die, will I let them take my liver and give to somebody else, or whatever part it is they can salvage from my body? That's a pretty serious question for many people. And so what they found is they just take whatever the default is. So in the countries where they have very little organ donations, is because they had to check a box, that much of an effort, in order to say yes. And in those countries where everybody's giving organs, well, they had to check the box, make that one little effort to say, no, I don't want to give my organs. And so everybody just said, okay, I give my organs in. I don't want to check it. It's too hard. It's too hard to check the box. Anyway, bizarre. But for our purposes today, what's the point? What's the point in my showing that as it relates to what we're talking about with Stephen Covey? I had surgery in Kazakhstan. I had a detached retina, and I decided I couldn't take time off from work. I didn't feel like I could, and I thought, and everybody kept saying, oh yeah, we have good eye doctors here. We have good eye doctors. Well, the eye surgeon proceeded to blind me in my left eye. And I won't go into all the details, but I'm almost blind. I can't read with my left eye, but I have peripheral vision. So it's just he killed the optic nerve in the very center. So wherever I look, I can't see. Wherever I don't look, I can see. kind of an odd situation. But right in the middle, I'm blind. And so, what should I do about that? I mean, there's nothing I can do about regaining the sight. The nerve is dead. But I had a discussion with my doctor, an American eye doctor. He said, well, that eye is pretty much useless. Well, and so when I got my glasses, he didn't want to give me any power in my left eye. He said, it's not going to do any good. I said, go ahead and give me the power it used to have. I'm not so sure you're right. I think maybe that still helps me with my peripheral vision. And peripheral vision is still important to me. And it is, because where do we get a sense, like if I'm playing basketball with somebody or volleyball or tennis, what happens if you only have one eye? Truly only one eye. You have no depth perception, do you? You're, it's like a two-dimensional. Everything's two-dimensional to you. You have no three-dimension vision. And so you're not going to be very good at any of those sports where something's coming at you, at 80 miles an hour or whatever it might be, because you're not perceiving it from two directions. So it's kind of, you might say, in some things where we talk about triangulating things, and we can figure out, when we can kind of perceive something from this way and this way, we can figure out, we can determine where it's at better than if we only have one direction. We triangulate. And that's kind of what we do with our eyes. We kind of triangulate with our eyes. And so it really is important to me when I'm driving, when I'm playing basketball or whatever I'm playing. I can do it pretty well still with one really good functioning eye and one eye that only has peripheral vision. And so it's kind of, what we're talking about here is, in essence, when we have multiple people brainstorming, we're triangulating a little bit. We're suddenly seeing something through somebody else's eye, so to speak, that we wouldn't have seen otherwise. And so where we may have made a mistake in our perception and our understanding of something, now we can understand it because we get somebody else's perception. So we triangulate, in a sense. And of course, it's really, when we're talking about brainstorming, it even goes beyond that. And that's a question of perception. But as Dr. Covey explains, and I've experienced many times myself, the more ideas you kind of throw out there, the more your brain can kind of look at all these things. I published a book. In journalism, I have a book. And I think like 10 pages, it's just story ideas about all sorts of subjects. Small type, one line at a time. So altogether, there are probably maybe 400 or 500 story ideas. And so somebody might say, why did you put all these story ideas in here? You don't think anybody else can think for themselves? No, that's not the point. But the more ideas they look at, the more likely their brain's going to turn on. Their brain's going to start thinking, oh yeah, he thought that, he suggested that, I got a better idea. I'm going to do it. I think I can do it this way. And so it is a way of brainstorming with my students. Here's 400 or 500 ideas. Think of one of yourself. So they might choose none of the 500. But in looking at the 500, or any portion of them, they get ideas going in their mind. And you know what the phrase means, prime the pump? Prime the pump? Probably not. You didn't grow up on a farm or something. But in the old days, when we would have in order to get a pump working, you had to put water in it first. You had to have some water in it before you could start sucking water out of a pond or whatever you're trying to suck water out. You had to prime it. You had to get some water in there. And so in some cases, you just pour it in, or you'd have a hand pump that you start pumping, and you get some water going through the electric pump, and then you could hit the button and it would pull out the water. We had, on the farm that I grew up on, when we first started our irrigation, we used siphon tubes. I don't know if anybody know how siphoning works? Because you can also use it to steal somebody's gas from their car. I imagine there's something else you can use it with too. But if you have a tube It can be flexible, or the ones we had were a regular form. They were shaped like this. Anyway, priming the pump is also used as an analogy as how to prime our thinking, so to speak. And so what I try to do with my textbook is to prime people's thinking, get them thinking of ideas, of stories they could write, and then once it gets going, the brain takes off on its own. And they think of their own ideas. So they don't use any of my ideas, but they see ideas, and that gets their brain working. And so the same thing basically happens when you're brainstorming. You start hearing ideas, and if you don't just, if you don't immediately start, trashing everybody's ideas, if you listen to them and you think about them, and you offer your own ideas, and they offer some ideas, and you maybe offer some improvements on their ideas, and they offer improvements on your idea, pretty soon you get to the point where you get to that, hey, that works. That would really work, wouldn't it? And you have that aha moment, and everybody's excited about it. Everybody realizes you've come to an idea that nobody had and probably would not have had if you hadn't been there sharing ideas and priming the pump and getting your mind in this creative mode. So that is when you achieve synergy. And so it goes beyond just seeing other people's perspectives. It does go beyond that. I may have told you this story before. Sorry if I did. But I was elected to city council in our city a number of years ago. And anyway, there's lots of government entities in an area in America. So, for example, there's an irrigation district, and it collects taxes and operates, and it is to make sure all the irrigation ditches are clean, and the ditches aren't breaking and all the water destroying somebody's farm or whatever. They're taking care of all the irrigation ditches. There's a mosquito district, and people pay as members of that mosquito district so that the people with the district go out and they spray ponds and things where there's idle water, where the mosquitoes might lay their eggs, and you would suddenly have a lot more mosquitoes. And so by putting some poison on the top of some of these ponds and other places where the water's sitting still, so it's a nice habitat for laying mosquito eggs, you kill those mosquito eggs before they can hatch. There's a fire district. Now the city has its own fire department, but outside of the city, who's going to protect the farmers? And so the farmers form a fire district, and they have their own firehouse with their own fire trucks. And so if somebody's farm catches fire, then usually the fire district is made up of volunteers. No professional, just a bunch of volunteers. And so they get a phone call, and they all rush in there to get on the fire truck and run out and put out somebody's fire. So you have all these little government entities, and so one of them is a library district, and its only job is to provide books to libraries in the area. Some small libraries, some big libraries. In fact, living on the farm, they even had a library mobile, a bookmobile they called it. And so the bookmobile was basically a traveling library. And they would put different books in it every time, and they drive out to the farms, and they just go from one farm to another farm to another farm. And so that was exciting to us, that the day when the bookmobile would come by, I think just once a month, we'd go find a book or 2 books or 5 books or whatever we thought we could read, check those out, and then we'd give it back to them next month when they came back and stopped at our farm again. So the library district also ran the bookmobiles out to the farmers. So, and of course, obviously, before the internet, this was extremely valuable. We didn't have, what else do we read? What else do we do? So we loved the bookmobile. Well, the city that I was a city councilman for was where the library district had its main office. But the city itself was not a member of the library district. So most of the cities around us were, and the farm areas were. And so all those people helped pay the cost of the library district for buying books and operating their libraries. But here we were, their main office was right in our city, and we weren't part of their district. And so with us, they were negotiating for us to just pay them a lump sum as a city to pay for our services that we received at the library where their main office was at, which was right within a block of our city hall. So there it was. They covered, I know they covered, they went at least 30 miles to the north, probably at least 30 miles to the west, quite a few, probably 30 miles in every direction, at least 30 miles in every direction. And they had, like say, in some of these small towns, a couple thousand people, they'd have a real small library there. And they did all this work for everybody. And here they were, our main office, they're our main office in our city, and we weren't part of the district. And before I was elected, the city and the library got mad at each other. And they were clearly headed for no better than a compromise, which a compromise is actually a lose-win. I mean, a lose-lose to some degree. It's worse. Both sides will give up what they wanted. So to some degree, compromise is lose-lose. But that's where they're headed at best. There's a possibility they're going to go so bad, such negative energy going on, that the city was going to say, get out of here, we don't want anything to do with you. And they've tried to set up their own library because they thought the library district wanted too much money out of their budget. And being elected politicians, they didn't want to go back to the people who elected them as city councilmen and say, we're going to raise your taxes. They didn't want to do that. Not for a real good reason, I don't think, but they wanted to be reelected, so they did not want anybody to say of them that they raised taxes. So they refused to negotiate, and so that's where they were when I was elected. They were really mad at each other, and they had not gotten to a compromise yet. So actually, they were probably destined. If I had not been elected, they probably were destined for the city to pull out altogether, and that would be definitely lose-lose, because then the city would have to start from scratch, build their own library, buy their own books, provide their own services, hire their own people to do it, and the library district, sitting there in the middle of our city, would not collect any funds from the city, and yet what do? I mean, they're sitting right there in the middle of our city. They have a library there. That's their biggest library. It was in our city. So are they going to close their doors? Are they going to build another library someplace else? Anyway, it was destined for lose-lose, and they were very upset with each other. So I think somebody thought it was really funny when I was elected that they said, "That's San Can over there." And so I was the liaison with the library district. And when I first got there, they wouldn't even let me sit in the same room with them. There was a meeting room, and so they had like 5 members of their library board that sit around the table, and their library director. And they said, "Here, you can sit in a chair out here out in the hall and look in the door." And so that's what I did. You know, for probably at least a couple of months, I just sat out in the hall and looked in the door. But then I started talking to them. This wasn't an opportunity to really get the two groups together because they were too mad at each other. So I kind of had to be the liaison between both groups. And so I would ask the library district, you know, what's going on? What is it you need for you to be happy? And then I'd go talk to city council and say, what is it we need to be happy? What the city council wanted was not raise taxes. For, again, only political purposes. They did not want even a little bit of, once you said you raised taxes, it could be that much, people would say, ha, he raised taxes. So everyone's going to raise taxes. On the other side, these people needed support for the library. And in fact, if anything, they'd like more support. They thought the library was really important for the community. And so they were not just thinking they wanted more money, or I don't think they even told the city this. They didn't dare. They said, we want a new library. We want a library about 3 times as big, brand new, computers. We want everything to really provide good service to our people. And we just soon have it here in this city. But we're not going to have it in the city if these people are, stabbing us in the back. So as I talked to each side, I thought I came up with the win-win situation. So it wasn't as purely brainstorming, although it was kind of my brainstorming with one side, then brainstorming with the other side. And so the proposal I went back to the city was, okay, we don't ever have to pay them taxes again. If we will support them in a ballot proposal for our citizens to become part of their district. Let's see if they will vote. Let's see if our citizens will vote to directly work with the district, and then we don't have to. In fact, we can lower our taxes because we don't have to pay them anything ever again directly. Our citizens will, but we won't. And so nobody can say we raised our taxes. So how about if we support them? But also they want to build a brand new library in our city. Although on the other side of the city where there's nicer houses now, our side is kind of running down. They want to build a brand new, triple the size library with a big play area with all sorts of cool benefits over on the other side of town. They'd like our support for that too, not monetarily, but when they put it on the ballot, they want us to say that's a good idea. That's all they want us to do. And so the city said, yeah, we can do that. And the district, really? You'll do that for us? And everybody said, oh, this stuff won't pass the first time. Maybe eventually we'll get it passed. But with the support of the city, with the library district, the very first time they asked the people, would you like to be part of the library district? They passed it. And the very first time they said, would you pay, I think they put it into simple terms, what this is going to cost you over the next 20 years to have this brand new, big library, modern library, is about what it'll cost you to go out to dinner once a month. Would you be willing to sacrifice going to dinner once a month to have this brand new great library in the middle, in the other side of the town? And they said, yeah, we'll do that. And so the citizens were willing to pay higher taxes to be part of the district and to have a brand new, big, beautiful library, even if the city councilmen were not willing to vote for it. So it's kind of like, it's kind of, again, not your normal brainstorming, but it was, in essence, brainstorming. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. What's their problem? What's their problem? In fact, people can make a career out of this, by the way. I haven't, but I could possibly. To be the mediator, be somebody who can talk to both sides and come up with ideas that they both like. And so definitely they avoided a major lose-lose situation where they were, like say, they were almost certain to go lose-lose. If they had really worked out, they might have gone to compromise, but then neither side would be happy with a compromise. The city would still have to maybe raise taxes, or they had to figure out something else to cut on one side, and the library would not get what they wanted. They would not get as much funding as they felt like they wanted, and they'd never get that new library. That wasn't going to happen. And so they both got what they wanted, and then some. The whole city got more than what anybody ever expected. They got a brand new library. The library district had direct funding, so it never had to come talk to the city anymore. The city was able to cut their budget because they didn't have to pay the library anymore. So it worked out very well. Well, I think we'll go ahead and watch another video here. It seems like I was going to bring up something else, but it doesn't pop into my mind. We'll watch another video, and maybe it will. Okay, I'm going to leave those for you to watch. I think we ended up, maybe go here and see this again. So we did watch all the TED.com. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 videos on this training. And by the way, there are several, I say most of the questions on the quiz come from these 4 that I haven't shown you, so you have to watch them. But altogether, that's 27 Yeah, 27 minutes of video there. And then there's 16 minutes at the bottom we haven't watched. So 16 and 27, anyways, less than 50 minutes. And the most important ones are definitely the trainings that he's talking about, the third alternative training. As I said, most of the questions for the quiz come from that. And it's I think, some of the most important training you get all semester. It definitely focuses in on what they're talking about today. The ultimate interpersonal success is with achieving this synergy that they're talking about. And it's so different than compromise and lose and so forth. Excuse me. So it's so important, if you want to achieve success in life, to be able to synergize with other people. That is where the greatest successes come when it comes to interpersonal success. But according to him, that's the greatest success of everything: interpersonal success. Your independent success, your dependent, you're gaining independence, your acceptance of the idea of being proactive. You're beginning with the end in mind. You're controlling your time with putting first things first. That's all important for controlling your little part of the world. But that doesn't get you into a situation where you're changing the world. You're still kind of caught in your little box until you break out of that and go out and interact with other people. I think I shared with you, my work with the non-government organizations in Kazakhstan. I sit down with a Peace Corps worker, and she brings her idea, and I share my ideas. And so what we conclude is, we're just starting here. It's not gonna be a big deal this year, but we agreed we would go try to find more partners who would help us provide training and support for NGOs, non-government organizations throughout the country. And we brought in more partners and brainstormed with them. Starting that first year, we brought in a lot of different people. Pretty soon, people started coming to us. A international organization came to me and wanted our university to be set up a center, kind of a research center for all NGOs in the country. And I was very sad. I'm very sad to say that the university rejected that stupidly. But a friend of mine got it at another university, and I've helped her with it. But that was 10 years ago and $10 million ago. $10 million, and now it's providing services to NGOs in like 8 different countries. It just began with a little bit of synergy, and then bring some more people in to synergize here and so forth. And pretty soon, I think by the second year, the U.S. Embassy came to me and said, "Hey, I think we can support you with this." So they gave us a little bit of support. We worked with them. And then pretty soon, USAID, which is still part of the government, but it's different from the embassy, they came in with the big bucks. And they said, "Yeah, this is too good an idea for just Kazakhstan. We need this to be in Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan and Azerbaijan and Pakistan and all the stands, along with Azerbaijan." So that's synergy. That's synergy. I was going to mention the other thing that related to the city is also as soon as I got elected, I introduced myself and I told them right off the bat, I really think it's important that we schedule an opportunity to go brainstorm what we want to accomplish with the city. Not only was the city mad at the library district, they're also mad at each other. The council had split into factions, and they were arguing all the time and calling each other's names. It was really kind of childish, frankly. And I just felt like if we would all go someplace, leave the city, go find someplace where we could isolate ourselves and brainstorm, that we could gain a common vision. And it wouldn't mean we'd always agree with everything, but we would be able to work together effectively. And so we did that. And think we came up, as I recall, every list that anybody offered was noted. We had a list of close to 100 ideas of things that we could do to improve the city. And we started off just by, we'd share our ideas and we would put it on a little, like a Post-it, and put it up on the wall. And so everybody put their little ideas up on the wall. And so we had, like I said, 100 Post-its around the walls. And then we'd go around and we'd have a chance to consider these and talk about them and take an idea and say, well, maybe this could be, maybe we could do this, make it a little better. We tried to, the rule again was try to be positive, no tearing things down. You can ignore them if you want to, but you don't tear them down. You can add new ideas on top of them, because that's part of the synergistic aspect of it, is that you take a good idea and make it a better idea with your ideas and so forth. And so we went around, we did that, and then when we were all done with those, I think it was a 2-day retreat that we went on. Two really important things came out of that. One was we had our list, and it was done. Everybody was heard. That seek first to understand them, be understood. Everybody was understood. Everybody had a chance to give their piece. We did then individually decide how to prioritize them. We ranked all those ideas, and then we had one list. And so it was through a democratic process. We had a list of close to 100 things, what we thought was most important, on down to the least important. That list was powerful enough that it didn't just last for the 4 years I was in city council. It lasted for, I think, 15 years later. I saw they were still working on the list. I think they probably could have done another brainstorming session and maybe updated it, but they were still working on our list 15 years later. It was such an extensive list of things, and they still made sense to the council. They just kept that list and kept working on it. And a lot of them were, ideas that were synergistic in the sense of, we talked about we need a convention center, someplace where people can come from out of town and there's rooms for them to meet in and so forth. And, I said, well, but how about if we invite a hotel to build our convention center in conjunction with their hotel? We give them a really good deal on the land. People will stay at their hotel. They don't have to, but they probably will. And they build our convention center for us. So we give them the land. We give them the position right next to our city facilities. They do invest a couple $1 million into building our convention center for us, but they will make it all back by all the enhanced stays of all these people coming from out of town to go to different conventions and things. So I mean, those sorts of ideas were shared and created through this brainstorming that we were doing. So ideas were, creative ideas were developed, but also while I was on that council, we definitely sometimes disagreed with each other. That's normal. But there was no backbiting and yelling and there was no hate. I guess that one of the things you could say. Before, there was hate in that city council. But by the fact that everybody had been heard, everybody was part of the process, and we were working the list we developed together, they developed a sort of partnership. They did gain some trust for each other. They did listen to me. We worked together to build this list. Like I said, we still disagreed on things. We didn't vote 100% all the time on every issue that came before the council. That wouldn't be expected at all. But you wouldn't take it personally. Before they were taking it personally, and that's where they started name calling and started this hateful interaction with each other, because if they couldn't agree, they hated each other. And that's not necessary. That's not necessary. I see too much of that in the U.S. government right now. They don't disagree, and now they hate each other, and that's scary to me. The democracy in America is breaking down because democracy depends on a loyal opposition. the opposition has to understand, okay, you beat me this time, I'm going to get you next time. A loyal opposition is important in a true democracy. And I don't see a loyal opposition right now in America. It's very disturbing to me. But that's what we were able to eliminate by simply through that brainstorming session. Everybody felt heard, everybody felt understood. We did this as a team, and that team spirit continued throughout those 4 years. And I don't know after that, but when I was on the council, it continued. And that's an important part of this process. Again, going back to the psychological error that Dr. Covey was talking about. Just being understood opens you up to a better interpersonal relationship. If you have felt understood, now we're on the same team. Now we're friends. We don't always agree, but I've been understood, and I understood you. And now we can work together, even when we don't always agree with each other. And so that was, that's an important principle to understand and to live by. So anyway, again, that's we only have one more habit to talk about next week, and that is sharpen the saw, and we'll talk about that then. But I hope that as we've gone through these first 6, that these have some meaning to you, that you can apply them in your own lives. I was actually just participating in an online discussion today where some all the educators were talking about how you could teach your students both leadership and discipline, in a sense. How to control their lives better, but also to be leaders. Because there's a sense that if you're disciplined, you're being controlled by somebody else. And when we think of it that way, that's what way we think of it, isn't it? I'm going to discipline you, But that word doesn't always mean that. The followers of Jesus in Christianity were called disciples, based on the same word, discipline. They voluntarily followed him and tried to emulate him. For example, and I don't know if other religions use that term, but that term, discipleship, is based on discipline. But it's a voluntary discipline. I follow you because I believe in you, and I want to be like you. Sort of, that's discipleship. If we can, with our employees and with our children, build discipleship, then we don't need discipline, in a sense. If they're following us because of our example, then we solve a lot of problems with that, rather than trying to say, you do what I say right now, or else. That's discipline, but it's not discipleship, and it's not likely to lead to it. And so it's important that we understand this. And I think, anyway, in this discussion we were having, I then brought in, guess what? I teach a class in success strategies. And Stephen Covey has a solution to this. It really is, first off, it's discipline in those, especially those, it is discipline, but the discipline you administer to yourself through the 7 habits of Stephen Covey make you a better leader. They're disciplines that you accept. You could say you're a disciple of Stephen Covey, in a sense. He's taught you how to act in a way that is more successful. And so as a disciple of Stephen Covey, you become a better leader. You become more proactive. You become more self-controlled. You become more self-destined. You become better in your interactions with other people. And so you accepted a discipline, in a way, from Stephen Covey to become a greater leader. And so the two do come together. It does take discipline, in a sense, to be a leader. But what he's teaching us, it also takes, there's a term I learned when working with migrant students, service leadership. The idea of being a leader by serving other people, doing good things for other people, helping other people, and you lead them by serving them. Instead of follow me or else. That's a whole different attitude. That's maybe a general in the military or whatever, but that's not the sort of leadership that comes normal in the real world. if we really want to be a leader, people have to have a sense that we also are kind of a servant to them. We're serving them. We are a leader who wants their best interest. We want to make their lives better, and therefore they want to follow us. Think of that in the business situation. We kind of talked about this before, as if you had every so often, every quarter or something, you sat down with your employees and you said, "How you doing, Joe? How's your wife, Mary?" And you talk to him about, you get to know him a little better, and say, "What can we do, Joe, to make your work here more effective? What do you have some ideas of things that maybe you could do for the company that make you more useful to the company, but also how can we then help you be happier? Are there things that we do that cause you not to be as happy an employee? We want you to be happy. We want you to be with our company for a long time. We want you to be more effective. How can we work together? How can your life be better if what can we do to help it be better?" And maybe discuss some lifelong learning strategies. Maybe take some more courses at the local college or something. Maybe there's some online courses you could take on Coursera or whatever is available. Brainstorm how he can be happier, how he can be more productive, how you can therefore justify paying him more because he's now doing more for the company. He's happier and you're happier. What if you had that sort of relationship with your employees? You think the company would be working pretty well? It would be. And that's not the normal, I would say not the normal management system. But if you learn, and if you can instill those habits of Stephen Covey into your life, those are the sort of relationships you can build in a company, in a family, wherever. So, okay, well, thank you. We'll have a good weekend. We'll see you next week.